The Battle of Fleurus, fought on 1 July 1690, was a major engagement of the 9 Years' War. In a bold envelopment, the Duc de Luxembourg, commanding Louis XIV's army of some 35,000 men, soundly defeated Prince Waldeck's allied force of approximately 38,000 men comprising mainly Dutch, German, and Spanish troops. Waldeck's German, Spanish, English forces were decisively defeated, with heavy losses in prisoners and equipment, and Luxembourg moved ahead to control Flanders. Although the French War Minister, Louvois, wished to press ahead and secure further success, Louis overruled him and ordered Luxembourg to reinforce the Dauphin's army on the Rhine and forego any major siege. The Allies, meanwhile, withdrew to Brussels to recover and rebuild their army. Background: in 1690, the main theatre of the 9 Years' War moved to the Spanish Netherlands. Command of French forces now passed to the talented Marshal Luxembourg, superseding Marshal Humieres, who had suffered defeat of the Battle of Walcourt the previous year. Once again, King William entrusted Allied forces in the region to Prince Waldeck. In other theatres, Marshal de Lorge commanded French forces in the Rhineland. De Lorge was opposed by the Elector of Bavaria, who had succeeded command of Allied forces in the region after the death of Charles of Lorraine. Meanwhile, Marshal Catinat led the French forces in Dauphiné against the Duke of Savoy, whilst Marshal Noailles commanded forces deployed on the border of Catalonia. Prelude: Prince Waldeck had hoped to delay the campaign to enable the Elector of Brandenburg to move on the Moselle and tie down Boufflers, but Luxembourg's early maneuvers had allowed Boufflers to move between the rivers Sambre and Meuse to support the French commander. Waldeck, meanwhile, left his assembly point at Tinnen and advanced to Wavre. After dispersing his troops to live off forage, the Allied army reassembled and advanced to Genappe on 8 June. In mid-June, Luxembourg split his forces. Humieres was relegated to supervise the garrison of the lines of the Lys and the Scheldt, whilst the main French army left Deinze and marched south, crossing the river Sambre at Jeumont on 23 June. Meanwhile, detachments from Boufflers' force under Rubantel had augmented Luxembourg's army, which continued its march, camping at Boussu on 27 June. As Luxembourg maneuvered south of Mons and Charleroi, Waldeck moved his camp between Nivelles and Pétain on 28 June. That same evening, Luxembourg personally led a detachment from Gurpenis to establish a crossing of the Sambre at Ham. A fortified position at Froidmont was soon compelled to surrender after artillery was brought across the river. A simultaneous attack by French dragoons seized an enemy redoubt that had been abandoned at the approach of Luxembourg's army. With the bridgehead secured, the rest of the French army crossed the Sambre on 30 June. Waldeck decamped and moved towards the French bridgehead. French and Dutch cavalry sent out to reconnoitre the area crossed swords in an inconclusive action near Fleurus. But by evening the French cavalry had withdrawn to Vilaine, where it was joined by the rest of their army, only 3 kilometers from the Allies. Battle. On the morning of 1 July, Luxembourg marched his forces towards Fleurus. Waldeck had set up his 38,000 troops in the 2 customary lines on the high ground between the village of Hepernisse on their right and past the Château of Saint-Amand on their left. Waldeck's front was covered by the Orme stream, whose elevated banks made a frontal assault all but impossible. Luxembourg divided his forces to attack both flanks of the Allied army, an audacious plan that, in order for it to succeed, would require secrecy and deception. The columns of the first French line split to take position between Hepernisse and Fleurus, with some troops moving up towards Saint-Amand. The 2 columns of Luxembourg's right veered off to the north across the Orme, their passage covered by the hedges and wheat fields, and by a screen of French cavalry. 40 cannon were positioned near the Château of Saint-Amand, and another 30 guns positioned between the Château and Fleurus. Unnoticed by Waldeck, Luxembourg had enveloped his flanks. Had the Allied commander realized that Luxembourg had split his army in 2, He might have overwhelmed the isolated French left before the right came into position, but he did not. After the French right wing was in position, their artillery opened fire at about 1000, striking the Allied infantry with great effect. The French left wing, commanded by Lieutenant General Jean-Christophe Comte de Gournay, opened their attack with a cavalry charge, but Gournay was killed in the assault. His death disordered his cavalry, who retired to Fleurus to regroup. A cavalry charge on the right wing, however, met with more success, driving the enemy cavalry back. On the heels of this attack, the French infantry now advanced against both flanks of Waldeck's line, which, finding itself enveloped by the enemy, finally broke. Some of the Allied troops managed to regroup on high ground near Fleurus, but were eventually overwhelmed. Despite being pressed by French cavalry, Waldeck was able to create a new line with his remaining forces further back. However, this line also collapsed, broken by French infantry flushed with confidence from their initial success. The remainder of Waldeck's troops streamed towards Nivelles in the best order they could. Aftermath. The Battle of Fleurus was a complete success, but devoid of result. Louvois, Louis's war minister, wanted to order Luxembourg to immediately besiege Namur or Charleroi, but King Louis, concerned about the Dauphin's forces on the Rhine, ordered Luxembourg to detach part of his forces and forego a major siege. Louvois objected, but King Louis wanted to be sure that nothing disagreeable happened to his son's command. Nevertheless, Luxembourg was able to put much of the land east of Brussels under contribution. Waldeck eventually retired on Brussels, where his injured troops were replaced with men from fortress garrisons. Spanish troops under the Marquis of Gastanaga joined the main Allied army, as did the Count of Tilly with troops from Legion Brandenburg on the 22nd of July. On the 2nd of August, the Elector of Brandenburg's forces combined with Waldeck, whose Allied army now numbered 55,000 men. With this force, the Allied army marched to Genappe, proceeding on to Nivelles on the 7th of August. The remainder of the campaign season in the Spanish Netherlands was relatively quiet. Boufflers temporarily combined his forces with Luxembourg, but in late August he returned to the area between the Sambre and Meuse rivers. After a series of minor skirmishes, both the Allies and the French returned to winter quarters in October, Luxembourg careful to station his men on enemy territory, while the Allies quartered in and around Maastricht. The Hanoverians returned home, while many from Brandenburg and Lüneburg found quarters in the fortresses of the Spanish Netherlands.